The photograph is obviously dated. I've lost some hair on my head since taking over at Amazon. I have about 20-25 minutes to deliver the keynote address, and speaking to a bunch of finance leaders, I'll share some thoughts about what my learnings have been on the journey, specifically on the topic of CFO as a strategic partner. First, since I stand here as a finance leader at Amazon, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about Amazon. We have a vision which is very simple. It is to be Earth's most customer-centric company. And we think this journey will never get done because there will always be others who will be wanting to claim this pole position. But we want to be known and acknowledged by all our customers as the most customer-centric company in the world. And that's how we have built all our processes and our capabilities in Amazon. That was our vision. What is our mission in India? Our mission in India is to simply transform the way India buys and sells. This is not just physical products, it's also digital products. And we think if we can transform the way India buys and sells, since buying and selling is economic activity and that is the core of our GDP, we think we will be able to transform the lives of not just customers, but also sellers and communities around us. And when we are successful in this mission, we believe we would have transformed India itself. So that's our mission which keeps us going in India. Now talking a little bit about what are the dimensions that any finance practitioner or leader looks at. At the heart of it, at least I think we spend our time on these 5 dimensions. Yeah? So what are they? They are about the financial markets. This is not just capital markets, but it's also interest rate markets, commodity markets, exchange rate markets. But the overall financial markets is something that we are supposed to have our eye on. The second is geopolitics. Whatever is happening in geopolitics. A couple of months back, I was speaking to the CFO of Tata Steel, and they told me how the Ukraine war impacted global steel prices, and that has had a big impact on the profitability and the strategy and what they drive at Tata Steel. Just the other day, I think yesterday, there was a New York Times article about the same Ukraine war, how it has created an opportunity for a certain Indian company to buy Russian crude at low prices and refine them and sell them at the market at a significantly higher price, thereby earning profits of billions of dollars. So as finance, we are constantly looking at geopolitics to see what risks and what opportunities unfold for us in our particular functional domain. And then of course, technology. The introduction speaker also called out as context to the session. And we are fortunate to be living in an era where ChatGPT, AI, machine learning are the flavor of the season. And they're not just flavor of the season, but they have a big transformational effect on what we will do in finance and in business. And maybe I'll spend a few minutes on that. And of course, policy and regulations, especially in India, where we tend to have a high overhang of regulations, have a significant bearing on what we can do in our industry and what we as finance leaders drive or guide our respective businesses. And of course, we must never forget the customer, who's a reason for existence of any business, irrespective of whether you're in a B2B or a B2C business. You need to keep tracking and monitoring the customer to see how his or her behavior is changing, or who else is serving the customer possibly better than what you're serving, and keep adapting yourself. So these are the 5 important dimensions that we should be spending our time on externally. Now, when you look at this, one of the things that should strike us, and this has been true in the last maybe 10, 20 years, and perhaps it will be true for the next 10, 20 years, there's nothing that is stable. Things have been changing. And you probably, all of you have heard the phrase VUCA. It won't go out of fashion. We live in a world where things are volatile, interest rates are going up, they're going down, there is speculation about it, there is uncertainty whether the Fed has paused on its journey and will probably reverse that journey. At least those are some indications, whether inflation has gone up or going down. It's pretty complex. All of these variables that I called out in the preceding slide, how do they affect, which has higher weightage, which has lower weightage, and are they positive or are they negative? And ambiguous, whether simple thing, is the Indian economy robust? The headline number indicates it is. But what about job growth? And are all segments of the economy growing at the same rate? There are some indications, for example, that rural and job creation may not be going well, but GST collections are obviously doing quite well. So the unorganized sector is getting converted to organized sector. So is that overall good? Some part of it is good, some part of it is not good. So things are pretty ambiguous. So as a finance partner, how do you sort of interpret all of this? So there are some very simple tips or toolkit that I would think we should bring to the table to deal with things when they're very complex. First of all, just counter the volatility with having a very clear vision. As an example, I spoke to you about the vision for Amazon to be Earth's most customer-centric company. That anchors everyone in the organization to a vision which hopefully will be very stable. It will not change. Technology around us might be changing, competitors might be changing, capital markets might be changing, but if you have a vision which is constant, that tells you that there is some stability that the entire organization should be going towards. So it's very important to counter some of the volatility with having a headline vision that keeps all of us anchored on pretty stable ground. My best example of uncertainty is this, and one of the senior leaders I worked with told me this. He said, people in your team will always come to you seeking certainty. You will never be able to deliver certainty as a leader because the world around you is so certain. But you can certainly deliver clarity. Clarity on the framework, on the criteria. A simple example on this is, people come to me and say, boss, when am I going to get promoted? You can't and you shouldn't give him or her a timeline when you're going to get promoted. A better answer is to give clarity on the framework by which he or she should get promoted, saying the following projects need to get delivered, the following skills or capability or whatever is the criteria for promotion in your organization needs to be delivered. And when you demonstrate that, you are ready for promotion. That's a far better answer to give in terms of clarity of the framework and keep reminding the person in this anecdote rather than try to give certainty about whether they will be promoted by the end of the year or by March 31st or so. And anchoring conversations on clarity and framework is always better than trying to speculate and bring certainty in what you'd want to do. Things are pretty complex. And at least my learning has been that when things are complex, let the machines handle it. I also believe in the 80-20 rule. If there are 100 variables in play, 20% of them or 20 variables will account for 80% of the impact that you're seeking. It's true if you look at your business mix, 80% or 20% of your customers will generate 80% of your business. Typically, that's a thumb rule that always works. Yeah? So keep things simple. Of all the mass of variables that are there, pick and identify the simplest possible things, keep it stable and anchor things on simplicity and let machines and algorithms and softwares, for example, handle the complexity around us. I'm also part of companies which try to forecast for the next 3 years or 5 years. In fact, in one recent conversation that we were having, I said what you're trying to do is a little bit like the Soviet era style of planning of drawing up 5-year plans. That perhaps is not the most important thing to do. What is more important is for the organization to be nimble. Yeah? Don't plan once a year for the next 5 years. Maybe if you want to do it, you can do it, but don't give too much of importance to that. What you should have is the ability to correct the course every quarter. So do a light touch exercise that you can perhaps repeat every quarter and then pick up the changes that have happened and then change your direction. So it's very important to be nimble and agile in the way you allocate capital expenditure, headcount, whatever business goals that you've got. Don't anchor too much on trying to speculate on what the future is going to be because that's going to be ambiguous, and build nimbleness into your financial processes so that they can take signals from what's happening in the recent 90 days and correct on its forecast going forward. Sorry, the titles haven't come out quite well. So in all this, I believe to be a good finance partner and a good strategic finance partner, you should focus on things that are never going to go out of fashion. And there are 5 things that I'm going to call out in the next few minutes about things that will always take up your time and attention, and they should. The first and foremost is corporate governance. As finance leaders, we are responsible to our investors, to our leaders, to our board of directors for making sure that we report the profit and loss of the business in the most accurate manner. We need to make sure that our assets and liabilities are measured accurately, and you keep checking them again and again, and you're managing your balance sheet and your cash flows. You need to make sure that you're holding your business leaders accountable, and you're maintaining a documentation of key decisions that are being taken by senior leaders so that you can revisit them. You need to make sure that if there are deviations into your ethical policy or code of conduct, people are held accountable and there is a monitoring system in place. This entire thing, and maybe more than this, is what I would call corporate governance. Whatever be the world around us being volatile, as a finance partner, this is the most fundamental of things on which the foundation of any business is going to be built. But by the way, excelling in this is not going to make you excel at your work, but this is a hygiene condition. This has to be okay. And then once this is okay, you can spend your time on some of the other things. The second thing that businesses should always be focused on, including the finance team, we often tend to get distracted. Not distracted, we measure the progress of our business on the revenue statements, on the cost statements. It is important to be clear in our thinking first and then in our language how each of these financial metrics connect back to the customer. Yeah? An example of your growth when you do your planning for growth is what part of your growth is going to come from new customers that you serve, what part of the growth is going to come from existing customers whom you not only retain, but you develop so that they engage more with you and then you grow, and what part of your defects, especially customer-focused defects, are being reduced and your costs are being improved, and what is the price that you are charging to your customers, and do customers think they can live with the price increase that you're going to take. So bringing together your P&L and making sure it is focused on the customer metrics and not looked at in isolation is something that is going to be pretty important. Make sure that the word customer features in your language, in your vocabulary, in whatever conversations that you have in finance and with people around you. So customer centricity is never going to go out of fashion. The third thing, and especially in Bangalore, where we are at the center of the world on startups, etc., it's absolutely important to make sure that you're measuring, monitoring, and evaluating the health of your business, not just on the reported metrics of GAAP, which of course you have to do, but on the simple cash position. How much of cash is coming in? How much of cash is going out? Where is your cash trapped in the system? And is a working capital cycle getting better or not? So we have to be focused on the cash flow, and this again is something that's never going to go out of fashion. The fourth is capability. Yeah, we obviously lead talent development for our finance team, and all of us read newspapers or come across YouTube videos or hear podcasts about artificial intelligence, machine learning, digitization, digital finance, automation, etc. We have to make sure that these capabilities are embedded in our finance team, and every year that capability develops in the direction in which we want to develop. So that's another thing, that the talent or skills or capability in the organization is something that you should always be sort of focused on. And whatever you do, things will always change in the world around us. Yeah? Change management is important. And it is to be successful, you need to manage change constantly. There's a beautiful, very simple quote: the only thing constant is change. Things are always changing. And each of us need to have experience in how to manage change. When you want to change something, map out, for example, who the stakeholders are, who's neutral to change, who's in love with status quo, and who's going to love change, and how do you communicate with all of these stakeholders to drive change. This is a skill that all of us need to build. It comes in very different ways, either in finance or in business, but change management is something that leaders have to be good at. So these are the 5 things that I thought all of us in finance, especially at a senior leadership level, should be sort of spending our time and attention on. Talking about change, I think this is a brilliant quote. I use it quite often in some of these talks. It's a little unfortunate that I believe the government is going to drop some of these chapters from biology lessons. But the biggest quote from Charles Darwin is actually relevant to business. And it is very simple. It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent that survive, but it is the one that is most adaptable to change. You can probably see this in the world around us. Google is, for example, a phenomenal company. It has built its search algorithm, which nobody else can duplicate. It ticks the box on being a strong company. It ticks the box on being an intelligent company. But if you're a senior leader at Google, and that's what Sundar Pichai is seeing, he wants to change the company so that it can cater to an era where ChatGPT or generative artificial intelligence is going to be widespread used, and that might fundamentally alter the way search would work. Yeah? So that's a fantastic example. And how well Google does going forward depends on how quickly Google can adapt itself to the change that is happening. And there are not too many points for how intelligent Google is today, or how large or powerful or financially strong it is. What is going to be important in this company is how quickly is it going to change going forward. And there are many examples around us. This is another very simple chart which brings out that the pace of change is accelerating. So on the x-axis is from 1960 to 2025. The composition of companies on the Standard & Poor 500, S&P 500 index. The y-axis represents for each company on the S&P index, how many years were they part of that index. So you can see that in 1960, the average company that constituted the S&P index had been part of that index for about 60 years. But as you move forward, and this chart was, I think, updated up to 2020, so it looked at the last 10 years up to 2010, the average tenure of a company to be part of the S&P 500, which is obviously a measure of how large that company is, that tenure has come down to about 20 odd years or so. So that tells you that the pace of change is accelerating in the world around us. I'll spend a few minutes maybe talking about how the finance DNA for the digital world needs to be built, but that's probably a separate detailed topic in itself. We'll take a few minutes on this chart, and I think in digital finance you move through 5 phases. Yeah, it may seem a little consulting company-ish, but I think the first is digital finance is all about capturing data. So the first part is, and this is not just financial data, it could be customer data, internal data, external data, and we know this quite well because we are an e-commerce company and a tech company. So being clear or building ground up the data flow and architecture is very important. In the erstwhile world, finance used to be the gatekeepers of how data is recorded and stored in the organization, because storing data was expensive. And we prioritized maybe 20 years back only financial data, and therefore it was logical and rational for the finance leader of the company to be the gatekeeper for data. But now you need to make sure your data flow architecture is such that anyone in the company can dip into that database and do their work. So the data flow and architecture is the first phase of what you do. And obviously, security is supremely important. You need to make sure that people can access data within the organization on a need-only basis. And if here you are lax, it's going to be very expensive in terms of the number of data privacy breaches that you could have. So when you build your data architecture, security becomes important. So these two, first phase and second phase, are table stakes. Then after that, you organize your data into information. And from information, you need to have a team of analysts who can draw insights. Data by itself is a commodity. It is useless. It is only after it becomes information, which means it is organized neatly into what you want it to be looked at, could be customer dimension, could be regional dimension, could be age, could be gender of your customers, or their history or whatever, that it becomes information. And then you have analysts who mine that information to extract insights. So you need to make sure that you have the capability to extract insights out of that information you've got. Then those informations have to drive action. So basis the insights that your team comes up with, you need to be able to quickly take decisions. And at least in Amazon, we think we need to empower the front line. And people take decisions on the insights virtually every day. And we have codified it so that some of our algorithms actually work automatically in the background on some of these insights. Yeah? So those insights then need to take action, which means you need to tweak something in the organization so that you can raise your hand and say, basis this insight, this is the decision I have taken, and this is the action that I have changed or decision I've driven. I think the holy grail comes, and that is where ChatGPT, AI, and machine learning are operating, that they look at past data and they're able to predict what a human being is going to look at. So they're able to predict the future. So the reason ChatGPT is so efficient is because it has mined all historical data. And if you give it a search, let's say places to visit in Bangalore, it'll give you, it is basis the data it has got, it is going to predict what is it that is most appropriate for what you are looking for. So it is actually making a prediction in the background. And this is the journey which I think digital companies sort of go to. It also includes, if you're not just an e-commerce company, I mean, you surface choices on your search engine, which you predict that the customer is most likely to click on and consummate into a sale. Otherwise, if you surface things that the customer is not interested in, the customer will visit your site, browse on a lot of things, but not make a sale, and you will not get a sale transaction on your website. So using past data to be able to predict a success and optimize the choices that you're making is the key for how data is managed in sort of digital companies. This is a quote which I absolutely love. I'm sure everyone has heard the first part of the quote. We've all heard the quote that information is the oil of the 21st century. And in fact, there are some companies which want to hoard information, build walls around it, and some of our policies actually want to make sure that all that information is stored in the country itself, as if somebody is going to steal that data. But all of these people and policies and this point of view misses the most important point, that information is a commodity. Just as oil is a commodity, information is a commodity. What will differentiate companies is not necessarily or just access to information, but the analytic capability that they have, which consumes that information, and as I said earlier, brings out data, insights, and drives actions and decisions. So just as a better engine, I mean, oil anyone can buy. If you pay in dollars, you will get whatever oil you need. But the ability to design a combustion engine that can use that oil and convert it to energy in the most efficient manner is really the differentiator. So that is why the capability on analytics is going to be more important, and probably more important than data itself. And this is something which I think many of us miss sometimes. Shifting lens a little bit, I again wanted to call out something that I have learned. We may spend maybe 5% of our time on strategy. It's important, of course. But 95% of our time is often spent on execution, and that's a right way to spend your time. Yeah? So whether you are finance, you're monitoring how your payments are happening, how your accounting is happening, you're monitoring how your business is performing, and as a business leader or as a finance partner to a business leader, you're looking at the nitty-gritty of day in and day out, how sales is happening, how collections are happening, how customers are being served. Execution is what is important. And this is a beautiful quote which I heard Jeff Bezos say once. He said, the difference between the number one player and the number two player is just 2% better execution. And especially in industries like e-commerce, where a lot of things you have millions and perhaps billions of transactions, that 2% better execution can over a period of time lead to a situation where the person who's better or the company that is better is twice the size of the next best company. So just 2%, 200 basis points better execution can sometimes result in the number one player being twice the size of the number two player. This is another quote which I heard from a senior leader in Amazon. And it was a little counterintuitive when I first heard it a few years back. Normally, one might think that as you grow more senior in the organization and you think what senior leaders have to operate in future, they need to lead people, inspire people, hire and develop a talent, which of course is true. But we are probably entering a world where 50% of leadership time will be spent in managing machines. And by machines, I don't really mean robots. I mean policies and programs and algorithms which run in the background, whether they are having the intended output or not, the degree of automation that is happening in your organization, whether it's giving you results or not. That is where people and leadership will spend a lot of its time going forward. You will have to manage to get into algorithms, at least in digital companies there. We're of course very fortunate to be living in a time, and it's almost since early January that the buzzword on ChatGPT, which the right technical phrase I think is generative artificial intelligence, we are probably at the cusp of another industrial revolution. Just as when the steam engine was invented, I doubt whether in the first couple of years or few years, people realized that there was a profoundly transformation change that they were going to go through. I think we are at the early stages of what a new industrial revolution could sort of look like. And it's important for all of us to keep learning and be connected with what is happening, bring in small pieces of it into our organization, test it, suck it, see whether it sort of works well for us. And those of us who do a good job on it would do well in this new sort of industrial revolution. I thought I'll also spend a few minutes on some critical attributes to grow professionally. Of course, everyone has their point of view. I've heard other people sort of call out. But there are three things for me that I thought I'll take maybe 2-3 minutes to sort of call out, which I think are very useful. The first of them is what I would simply call insist on high standards. Yeah? Some might call it continuous improvement, but it's a very hard quality to build, imbibe, demonstrate, and practice day in and day out. Very often, all of our teams come to us to review their work. Somebody might come with a spreadsheet, somebody might come with a piece of analysis, somebody might come with a document or a PowerPoint presentation. We obviously as leaders play a role somewhere at the back of our head of being cheerleaders. We want to give positive feedback to our teams to say, yeah, you've done a good job, because that obviously is the heart of motivation. But good leaders who are able to blend that responsibility of being cheerleading with the responsibility of being critics in a constructive way, I think master the art of insisting on higher standards. And if you can practice this not only about yourself, but about people around you, over a period of time, you can have a pretty large impact on the teams around you if you demonstrate continuous improvement and you have a mindset which insists on high standards and you don't compromise on what is acceptable. So that's how the journey from good to great and great to excellence would happen. I think the soft skills or ability to recognize and drive this is very important. It also calls out, you need to be connected with details. That's how you would know that this work has been done well, but it can be done in a better way. You need to have a vision of being able to think non-linearly, saying, okay, this solution works in a linear way, but there is another way of doing this which could be non-linear, and therefore there's another way of sort of expanding or bringing vision, so that's insist on high standards. The other quality that leaders are always good at is judgment. Yeah? So the ability to say the right things at the right time or take the right decision at the right time. Of course, data and analysis is important, but in your gut, knowing how to take, what decision to take, the intuition and building up that intuition is very important. I was fortunate to be at a cocktail with Jeff Bezos 3 years back, and we were all asking him questions in the limited time that we had. And I asked him a question of, in Amazon, there's a leadership principle called R right a lot. That means you are right a lot. That means good leaders are those who have a track record of being right on their decisions. I said, how do you build that skill? It's very easy to tell people that you need to have high judgment, but how do you practice it? And Jeff's response, and I still remember that, he gave a few tips. He said, if you want to build R right a lot or good judgment, you should listen a lot. Yeah? He said, if you're the senior most person in a room and there is a meeting that is happening, you should speak last. Make sure that everyone else in the organization speaks so that you've heard different and diverse points of view, and then the senior most person speaks. That, he said, in a way is tip number 1. Tip number 2, he said, never be afraid to change your point of view. People have this myth that those who are very good at judgment, senior leaders, hold on and dig into their position, dig in their heels into a position at a point of time, at any point of time. He said, if you want to build your judgment, you should not be embarrassed about changing your point of view. And he said, it is okay to keep changing your point of view frequently as you discover new facts that require you to change what you held your position. So that was a little counterintuitive for me. That was the second thing that he said. The third thing he said is, if you have some beliefs in your head, actively look for data that can disconfirm those beliefs. That was the phrase that he used. Look for data that can disconfirm the beliefs that you hold. So for example, you might think that volume growth is really important in an organization, or the best leaders in the company get hired from certain B schools or whatever. That may be a belief you might have. Look for data where those beliefs are being proved wrong. And very often leaders are blind to data that challenges their beliefs. But if you want to improve your judgment, actively seek data that challenges what your beliefs are. And if you are open to it, that is how you would sort of, over a period of time, get better at judgment, is what he said. The third thing that I believe is very important to be a leader over a long journey is just this: learn and be curious. Very many of us often fall into a trap where we think we are senior leaders, we know everything that has to be learned, but the world around us is changing so fast that you have this mindset that I need to keep learning constantly and be curious. It forces you to be humble in your outlook. And that's very important. Leaders have to be humble. It's easy to say that leaders should be humble, but I believe that if you have this ability or a natural appetite for learning and you're curious, that forces a mindset where you are then humble, because you recognize that people around you might be doing things in a better way and a different way from what you are sort of learning. So I'll take a few minutes to call out what, according to me, is a test of a good strategic finance partner. And I've spoken about this sometimes in the talks that I've given. Just do a thought experiment. Imagine that there is a fly on the wall in the office corridor, and two people are walking in the office corridor, they meet each other, and they have a 10-minute conversation, and one of them is a finance guy, and one of them is a business guy. Just imagine there is a fly on the wall listening to that conversation. If after a period of, let's say, about 10 minutes, the fly on the wall, after listening to the conversations, is not able to make out who's finance among the two people and who's business among the two people, that is when I think you tick the box that the finance person has become a good strategic business partner. That is because the conversations would be such that there is osmosis of finance into the business partner's thinking and mindset. And equally, the finance person has imbibed business terminology and they are articulating in their conversation the business point of view, that anyone who's listening in is not able to make out who's the finance guy and who's the business guy. That's when you tick the box that the person that you worked with, assuming it's a business person, you met the test of being a good strategic finance partner. And then that means that you are a co-pilot, probably even ready to take on the pilot's seat in terms of being the right hand to the business guy. So that's my fly on the wall test. I have this, I think these days it's a little fashionable to bring mythology into everything. And I had this point of view, so it was easy for me to fit it into this. So in a way, a good strategic finance partner, in my view, has the qualities of the 5 Pandavas. Yeah, I'm sure all of you are familiar with it. Yudhishthir was the eldest. He was known for his integrity. Yeah, whatever he spoke, people believed it was the truth. So when he said Ashwadhama Hatak Kunjara, Dronacharya dropped his weapons in the battle of Mahabharat because he believed that whatever Yudhishthir said would be the truth. So that is the quality that we need to demonstrate as finance, be known for our integrity like Yudhishthir was. The second is of the Pandavas is Bhima, who's known for the power and strength that he brings. And all of us know in finance, we have a seat at the head of the table, and when Bhima gets angry, they say the ground under his feet would tremble. So similarly, finance, because we organize cash flows, we speak to the investors, we know the true health of the business, we carry the power that comes with our position, and we should exercise it wisely. But we should recognize that we have an awesome power at our command, like what Bhima had. Arjuna, the third of the Pandavas, was known for his accuracy. Yeah, his powers as an archer. He was precise in what he was aiming for. So we are gifted in our functional training to speak with comfort about numbers. And the way we measure the health of our business, we bring precision and accuracy. Our business partners may sometimes get away with hand-waving arguments, etc. But we bring precision into the conversation because that is what is the responsibility we have. So we are accurate, focused like Arjuna on what is really important for the business in terms of value creation. Nakula and Sadeva bring up the other point. Not much is known in the Mahabharata about Nakula and about Sadeva. In fact, they were very gifted swordsmen, but there are not too many stories about them. And similarly, as a finance partner, sometimes you will not find much coverage about yourself. The limelight will always be on the business leaders. And like Nakula and Sadeva, you sometimes need to be contented to operate in the shadows. And it is quite okay to do so. So these are the qualities from the 5 Pandavas that I thought a good strategic finance partner brings. And of course, let's not forget Draupadi. She served different masters, and none of them were ever able to find out who was her real favorite. So similarly, in finance, we work with different business partners. We treat all of them equally, and that is something as a quality that I think is pretty sort of important. So that's the end of my presentation. Hope I left you with some thoughts which will inspire you for your day. I think we have a quote in Amazon, it is always day one. I also believe this quote is true. Today is the first day of the rest of your lives. And if you practice, you learn, think of what lies ahead and think of today being the first day of your life. And irrespective of your age, 30, 40, 50, or whatever level of the organization you have, I think if you treat today as the first day of your life, there's an enormous change that you can make going ahead. So thank you very much. I'm done with my talk.